So many people have asked me how I made my little round journal that I thought it was about time I did a film about this. I just one day just fancied having a circular journal for doodling and playing and having fun and experimenting and all those things. And I made this as a prototype. It wasn't a brilliant prototype. I actually had to stick some pages back in. So like, I think this one was falling out. So I've just stuck some more background collage over to make sure things don't fall out. But that's fine. It was a prototype. So I want to show you two different ways of making a circular journal. I've never been able to find one in a shop or online or Etsy. If you know where, please tell me, because maybe they're out there. The first way is just to use an existing sketchbook and turn it into a circular journal. In the second film, I'll show how to make one from scratch, actually using a perfect binding so that you can really be in control of the paper. But you know, let's start with the straightforward way first. So what you need is a cutting mat. You need a book. You need a sharp knife. I like a tie on my journal. You can see I just used old shoelaces on this, but you'll need something for a tie. I haven't found that yet, but by the time I get to that point, I will. If you want your journal to be totally circular, your book needs to be twice as tall as it is wide. This book isn't. I think if I just had the binding, that would be 11 centimetres, and that is 22. So the unbound bit, that would make the perfect half circle, and therefore when it opens out, it'll be a full circle. But it's got this binding on, and I could, of course, make this smaller, but I'd waste a lot of paper, and I don't want to do that. So this is actually going to be an oval book by the time it's finished. So the next thing we need is something circular that is perfect for cutting round. I found this dish to start with, and it's almost the right size. It's a little bit small, and then I found this plate, and that is just about perfect because I want it to touch the edge just where that binding is. Now, of course, you could use a compass and just draw a circle and then cut round that. I find it easier to get a smooth cut if I'm cutting against something. You need a really sharp knife. So if you've got one of these that you break off the end bit so that you've got a really sharp knife, because paper just dulls your knife so quickly. We're going to start by cutting the cover. So I have marked there where I'm going to go. I want it to hit the cover at the end. You don't need to put the pencil marks in because we're actually cutting against something. And the best thing to do is to do it in a number of passes. Don't press so hard that you're trying to cut through the cardboard in one pass, because you won't, and you're more likely to slip. Now you are using a super sharp knife. Mind your fingers. I have to do my health and safety there. If you find the knife is getting blunt, you can feel it getting blunt, obviously just take off another segment. Let's have a look. Once you've got that groove there, you may find it easier just to go into the groove and cut through. But again, just watch you don't slip. And I find it easier to cut a quarter at a time. Don't worry about the paper underneath, because we've got to cut all the paper. So if you go through to the paper underneath, don't fret about that. And there's my first quarter. And now I've got to do exactly the same here and on the back. I'm probably teaching you to suck eggs here. I do apologise if I am. But did you know you can take the end bit off your knife and use that for just breaking off the end part of your knife. Ah, that's better. If you get any little bits like this, we can just trim that off. I've removed the four corners and we have a circular, well, it's not circular, do you see what I mean? It is an ellipse. And we've got the cover. Again, don't worry about these edges. We're going to sort those out in a moment. Now we need to think about the inside pages. If you look at my prototype, you can see that the pages inside are smaller than the cover. So it could be tempting just to carry on using the cover as your guide. Don't do that. You want the pages inside to be slightly smaller because then the cover protects your pages, and also if you're using it with collage, it'll get thicker and thicker and they'll end up sticking out if you're not careful. You need to find something that is slightly smaller circle wise. I want the circle to end where that yellow starts. So let me make sure that is the case. The pages are already smaller than the cover that way, and I need to make sure they are smaller here. So that is going to be my cutting line, I reckon. Again, sharp knife, and I'm coming round in one swoop to do the full half circle. As I cut through paper, I can remove it and then just keep going. I find cutting the paper the hardest thing. The covers seem to go well, but paper is just harder. If you're into junk journaling, you could do this with an old, I don't know, cookery book or whatever sort of book you want to turn into your junk journal. A couple of tips for this process. As you start getting through the pages, I would open the book out and then reposition your template so that you're not cutting through a really thick wodge, because the danger is that you'll kind of go under the edge. The other thing is that you might get little stray bits like this that just snagging. Don't worry about that. You can cut them off. Here, I haven't done that terribly well, so you can just trim that off to make it better. Now, let me give this as a warning to you. Don't know if you can see, but as I have started to, I've folded the page over and I've been pushing down, doing them in chunks, I've obviously slipped. So rather than that being a nice straight vertical edge with everything in line, they're starting to get smaller and smaller. So just guard against that. I was obviously a little gung-ho, worrying more about my filming than about my cutting. So I am now going to start from the other side, from the back, and start again. I'll pretend I did that all on purpose to show you what not to do rather than what to do. In the second video, I'm going to show you how to make it from scratch, but what you can do, because now you can actually get circular watercolour paper that's already pre-cut. So if you find this cutting process annoying or tricky or just too time consuming, you can actually make your book with pre-cut circular watercolour paper. I'm quite annoyed with myself for doing that, but you have to forgive me, please, because sometimes when you're concentrating on filming and talking and cutting and something goes wrong, and it did, but say good lesson. What I don't want to do is cut the pages underneath. So what you can do, get your mat and put it between to protect the pages and indeed the back cover that you've already cut, because what you don't want to do is trim the back cover to be the same as these pages. Okay, we're all the way through, I believe. If I hold it that way, you can see it's far from perfect. If I was a perfectionist, I could go back and trim those so they're all straight. I'm not a perfectionist. What I now need to do is grab a really sharp, small pair of scissors and trim off any little bits like this that I don't like, and also get rid of all the trimmings so I've got a clean work area. Having cut everything and trimmed it by hand, next thing I like to do is just get a bit of sandpaper. This is 70 grit, doesn't honestly matter, and just go over any rough edges. You can do that with the pages as well, so hold them firmly together. And for me, where I go from the straight to the curve, that is the least, or that's the place that's roughest. So I'm just going to gently sand that down. And that is effectively our book. So it's very simple to do. Now, wouldn't be much fun if we left it like that. For goodness sakes, we're artists. So we might want to decorate the cover. And if your cover was already covered, then the raw edge would look really horrible. This is just plain grey board, so I could get away with it, but I don't like how it looks inside, and I do like a decoration. I want something to keep it closed, to say here I used an old shoelace, so shoelace is good. We can put that round. You could just use an elastic band, but what's the fun in that? Found this paper which I thought would go well with that binding, because that binding is going to stay, and then I thought I'd put a brown ribbon to keep it closed. You can leave it plain, or you could paint this or collage it or texture it or do all your mixed media stuff. I'm going to cover it with paper. Cut that in half. This is going to be stuck there. I am then going to fold over. I'm going to cut it, notch it in, fold it over, and then I am going to use this as an end paper to cover up the cut edges. I've got some just ordinary glue, just white school glue, nothing posh. I do need a sheet to protect the rest of my book. So I'm spreading this on quite generously. Going to do the same on the other cover. I'm going to let that dry in place. Right, that should have set. So what we need to do is score the paper to make it easier, and I'm just using the back of the pair of scissors. That will just make it easier to fold. Then trim round like this, and then we need to basically snip in, because this will allow us to fold it round that curve. Let's do the same on the other cover, scoring round and snipping in every centimetre and a half or every ½ inch. Doesn't have to be specific. Now I'm going to protect my surface. I'd also just get glue on the edge of your book or the edge of the cover. Doesn't matter if we get glue on this page particularly, because we are going to glue the first page to cover, and then we're pressing these up and over in turn really pushing those down, and that's where the little scoring really helps. Each will overlap with the previous one. Just get it as tight in as possible. Maybe smooth that edge while the paper's still damp. And then the plan is to basically glue that, and that covers all your raw edges. I'm being careful how far I go there because I don't want to get glue on the bits that don't need it. So let's just put a little bit of glue on this edge and then gently smooth it down. And that covers all our raw edges. The inside of a cereal packet is really good if you need to protect and stop pages sticking together. It's sort of really non-stick. So I'll put a bit in there. And then we're going to do exactly the same with the other cover. The paper softens as the glue sort of dampens it. So that's why you should be able to smooth any little bumps off. Like that, and then put my non-stick in there, and then we can weight that down again till it's dry. Oh, that's looking quite jolly, I think. Let's just take those out. So you could absolutely leave the book like this and use the book like this, and apart from the the cock-up that I did on cutting the pages, that will work rather nicely. However, if you would like to do something a little more, I was thinking about that closure. Usually when I do a closure, what I do is put it under the front sheet and stick it in place like that, and it actually goes all the way round. Here I can't put it all the way round because we've already got that cloth tape on the back. So I had this idea, and I have no idea whether it'll work. Never done this before, but if you don't try new things, how do you know? So what my thought was is to actually cut a hole in the cover and thread that through and then out here so that it's got a tie, and it goes all the way around, and do the same in the back, and then it can tie. Big question is, that's 22 centimetres. Where do I want the holes? What I envisage doing is cutting out a little square or rectangle for this to thread through. Take that out. Just lift these layers of paper away. Well, it's not the neatest thing I've ever done, but never mind. So let's check that's going to go through. Absolutely. I think that would be all right, won't it? And then I'm going to do exactly the same over here. Gradually cut the layers. So that is my cunning plan. That's what it's going to look like. And then it can tie there to stay shut. I think that looks quite good. I know it's a bit messy around there. Might touch it up with a bit of pen or something. Right, let me do the other side and I'll show you the finished result. So there you go. That was my totally handmade sketchbook. If you come back for the next video, I'll show you how you can make one yourself with a glued binding so that you can use exactly the paper you want inside. But in this one, we've just adapted an ordinary sketchbook and made it into a round sketchbook, and then finished it off with a little bit of pimping.